Last week we started a series, and if you saw our marquee out front, and by the way, welcome to those on YouTube. If you saw our marquee out front, it says Scary Bible Stories all this month. And then it gives the time of our church. There are dozens of scary Bible stories. People don't like to talk about that, but we're in the middle of October, and like lots of people, and the culture says that we're supposed to be scary. Some of our neighbors are actually decorated for the holiday at the end of the month. And the Christian church sometimes shies away from it. And what I'm going to tell you is this: don't shy away from it. Because the truth is, Satan doesn't deserve 1 day, 1 week, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1/2 a second. But if we stay silent and we stay standoffish, the world's going to do what media says. The world's going to do, you start seeing Halloween decorations before Labor Day. In fact, Halloween has superseded Thanksgiving. Now that says something about the country. When scaring people is more important than being thankful. Last week we started in a series of unfortunate events. We were talking about 4 young men: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. And as young men, probably early teenagers, they were taken from their home country by force. And they were forced into the king's service of the king that occupied their land and stole from their country, took all the things out of their temple and offered it to a false god. And the king saw the best and the brightest, and he tried to make them fit the new culture's mold. Almost 100 years ago, Karl Marx said, "Give me your children until they're 7, and I will have them for life." So this king kind of did the same thing. Let me take them when they're young, and I'll make them good citizens of my culture. And he tried to feed them with the best food of the culture, and the best food wasn't healthy. And Daniel stands up and says, "Give me a test for 10 days. Let me and my boys eat what we're used to. Let everybody else have the king's food. And we'll see how it is after 10 days. And after 10 days, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel look better, look more alert, doing better. So the king made everybody go to this new diet. And then the king calls his wise men, and he has a dream, and he says, "Here's the deal. Not only do you have to interpret the dream, but you have to tell me what it was. You have to go from scratch. And if you can't, you're dead." And they were going to kill these 4 young men. And Daniel gets bold and goes before the king, and he says, "I'll do it. Just give me a day or 2 to figure it out." And he goes before God, and he has his friends go before God. And that was last week. But this is a series of unfortunate events. So after this, and the king says, "Oh, you know what, you guys," he promotes them, he makes them heads of his government, he puts them in charge of entire areas of his government, and then the king gets an ego. See, part of the dream was that this kingdom was going to be strong and made of gold and very powerful. It's going to filter down through the generations, but this king's got it wired. So he decides he's going to take and prove his wealth. And he builds a statue to himself. And it's like 60 cubits tall, and it's made of gold. For those of you who don't know what a cubit is, it's the distance from here to here, roughly 18 inches, which means it's about 90 feet tall. Now, in the biblical world, that's pretty impressive. Think about it. In the biblical world, this thing is 90 feet tall. It's about 8 foot wide, and it's in the statue of the king. And the king brings it in, and he wants to show it off, because right now his culture is in charge of everything. He's the big culture of the world. And he calls in all his government officials. Now I could use their name, I could use their political titles, and here it is, just so you know. Satraps. When was the last time you dealt with a satrap? A prefect. How many of you ever had a prefect? I've had some defect, but not prefect. Governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials. They were to come to the dedication of this massive statue. And they had this bright idea. We're going to make everybody bow down. Bowing down to the statue is like bowing down to the king himself. So the day arrives. Now you have to picture this, because 90 feet tall of gold, 9 to 9 foot wide, that's pretty impressive. And everybody was grateful to bow down. Oh, king, you let us be here, yay! But Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they went, wait a minute, no. See, we're in a multicultural, multi-theological setting. And our God doesn't like to be second-rated. So they went to the king's magistrates, and they said, we pray to one God only. You have all these gods, that's good for you, not part of our culture. And the king listens. Well, first he gets told that they're not coming to bow down. So he's a little bit upset. But these guys are part of Daniel's crew, and he loves Daniel. He's made him high up official. Daniel's not in the neighborhood at the time, so Daniel doesn't have to be there. But his boys do. By the way, if you notice, and I just want to make sure, because there are some people who are going through, if they're reading their Bibles and they know what we're talking about, they're going, you know that that's not the names that's given in that chapter. Here's what I'm doing, folks. I'm keeping it to the Hebrew names. If I gave the Babylonian names, you'd get it quicker. Okay? Do you want to know the Babylonian names? Meshach, or Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Somebody, I get them out of order. You're just so used to saying. But the truth is, that was their new culture names. They were not Babylonians. Daniel, his Babylonian name is Belteshazzar. But at heart, they're still Hebrews. See, what I'm going to tell you is, you can be in a foreign culture, you can be in a sinful culture, but you are still God's people. Amen. You are still God's people. And if you're God's people, you keep the name God gives you. By the way, God's name for his people are sons and daughters of God. You are sons and daughters of the King of Kings. Now the king is really angry, because they said they not only defied him, but they defied his whole multicultural, religious, polytheistic structure. And he says, you guys are going to die. Now in his country, his capital city, they had to mold and build this gold statue from somewhere. Guess how they did it? They smelted down gold. They had furnaces that burnt down gold, and then they would mold it, they would put it together and beat it into shape, and they had these furnaces right there, and he said, you guys are going to die in fire. Fire is a miserable way to die. It absolutely is. And they said, well, King, our God is worth it. In fact, whether we live or whether we die, we've got to serve him over you. Sound familiar? See, governments want you to serve them over all. Even good governments. And they'll tell you for all the benefits, but the truth of the matter is, it's about them holding you under their power. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah stand up to the king. They go to the king and say, King, we love you. You're taking good care of us. But you're not the reason we do this. The king says, I want that furnace 7 times hotter than it's ever been. Now, most people don't know, but gold melts at like 1,200 degrees, maybe a little higher. And they wanted it 7 times hotter. That's a hot fire. Think about it. They're pumping those bellows as fast as they can to get that heat up. In fact, it got so hot that they then took these 3 and they bound them up. They got the 7 of the strongest military men in the country, and they tied them up, hands and feet. Then they picked them up and carried them to the edge of the furnace. And it says that the guys who went to throw them into the furnace, they died from the heat. Just being close enough to throw the 3 guys in there, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Just being close enough to throw them in was enough that they died. Sounds like an unfortunate event, doesn't it? And they're dying because their trust in God overrode the pain they would feel defiling God. Sinning against God would hurt them more than 7 times hotter than 1,200 degrees. Think about that. When you're at a place and they're starting to make jokes about Christians and they poke some fun at you and it hurts, does it hurt? 6,000 degrees worth? No. And yet some people are afraid to announce that they're Christian because what if they make fun of him? Now, I could reveal a whole lot more, and I'm not going to, but I'll say it this way. What if they make a mean tweet about you? Does that really change anything? By the way, Pastor Will has had mean tweets posted about him, okay? And you know what? I don't care. But having said that, they take them and they throw them in the fire, and the king is watching to watch them writhe and burn and bubble and pop. That's a visual picture, yes. And he looks in and he calls his advisors over and says, wait a minute. How many people did we throw in there? They went, we threw 3. Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. He says, no, there's 4 in there. And as he's looking in the furnace, there's 4 people walking around in that furnace. They threw in 3, but there's another one. Now the guards are all dead around the edge. And the king is befuddled. He's numbed. He's confused. He's going, wait a minute. I ordered 3 people to go in there, and that fire is hot enough that the guys who threw them in died. And they bound them up hands and feet. And those 3 guys we threw in, they couldn't move. And they're walking around in there. And there's somebody else with them. Whoa, this is too much to handle. Get them out of there. Now I can hear the guy who has to tend the fire going, yeah, right. No, 7 guys died. Throwing them in? No. We're going to hold on a minute. Okay, cool off the tanks. Let it chill down a little bit. Takes a while to slow down that kind of heat. Right. Mishael, Azariah, Hananiah, you're allowed to come out now. But they're walking around, so their bonds have already been burned off of them. And they come out. And I'm sure they went, hey, bring that other guy with you, whoever he is. And only 3 come out. And they walk up to him to see what's going on. They're not blistered. In fact, their hair isn't singed. And they didn't even smell like smoke. Their clothes were in perfect condition, not even charred. Their bonds are gone. But their turbans and their coats and their sandals don't even have a black mark on it. How on earth did you survive when the guys who threw you in, just getting close enough, died? And the king went, oh no, that's the God. That was God in there with them. Their God must be bigger than ours. And he went out and proclaimed across the whole country that nobody better say a bad thing about their God. Because obviously he's got something going on. In fact, if you do badmouth their God, you're going to be cut to pieces, and your houses and everything you own is going to be turned into rubble. This king had a power fetish, man. This king liked being king. But he recognized that there was a greater king. And it sounds like everything went good, didn't it? They started living their lives. He actually promoted them. He gave them benefit. He gave them more power in the kingdom. All's good. But this is a series of unfortunate events. And a little bit of time later, the king calls Daniel. He says, Daniel, I have a dream again. Remember the first time Daniel got a dream? He not only had to tell him how to fix it, what it was about, but he had to tell him the dream. King says, I'll tell you this time. All you got to do is figure it out, because my wise men, I got new wise men, they're not that bright. Let me figure it out. But it's keeping me up at night. This dream is bothering me. And Daniel says, well, tell me the dream. And it says that his kingdom is going to be taken away from him. And he's going to wind up acting like an animal. He's not going to have a house to live in. He's going to be homeless. He's not going to have food. He's going to have to eat grass. By the way, for all of you people who are diabetic, high blood pressure, and all that, that's the only thing you're allowed to eat anymore. And it's got to be organic, so you're in trouble. Okay? And Daniel says, well, here's the thing. Remember I told you you're going to be a great king? And you are? You're going to have a hard time. See, your attitude and your ego and your thinking that you're better than God is going to come bite you. And for a period of time, 7 times we're going to tell you how to get out of this, and for 7 times you're not going to. On the 8th time, you're going to figure it out. And fortunately, your kingdom will be restored. And the king went, wait a minute. I'm the king. You're telling me that I'm going to lose everything. Act like a wild man. Live on roots and berries. Eat grass like the ox in the field. Not going to happen. I'm king. And guess what happened? In a very short time, he was dethroned. He was put out to pasture. When I say put out to pasture, literally, he was not allowed to live in the kingdom. He ended up not having any food, any money, any clothing, and not even wearing a stitch of clothes. He just kind of ran around. He had lost his mind. It says that the dew poured on him in the morning. He was sleeping outside. He ate grass because he couldn't afford anything else. And people came to him and said, why don't you just embrace the God of Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael? And he was incoherent. And he went about his business. 7 times this happened. For 7 months, he was off his rocker. Power does that sometimes. You can become thinking you're so powerful that nothing can touch you, and boy, God knocks the chops right out from under you, doesn't he? And after 7 months, they said, why don't you embrace the God of Daniel, and Hananiah, and Azariah, and Mishael? Well, what do I have to lose? I'm down and out. There's no Beverly Hills here to be down and out in. I'm stuck in the boonies. And almost instantly he was restored, and the kingdom was built back better. By the way, I'm using a lot of political puns here because we're coming up to election time. Now I'm going to give you the sidebar here. You will never hear me endorse a candidate from the pulpit. It's not what a pastor should do. Now, some pastors will disagree with me. If you have hate mail for it, send it to, the website. Okay? I won't pay attention to it, but you can send it. Make you feel better.
Just put it on Twitter. You don't need it.
Yeah. Put it on Twitter. I don't read it. But here's what I will say. I don't buy into any politician. I will tell you that there's some politicians in this area that are running for election, and they are very fine people. And they've been a good friend to this church. And I will tell you that there's other ones who have not been a good friend to the church and to God in general. And I will tell you that they're fine people too. What I will tell you is this. You are privileged enough to be able to attend elections. You are privileged enough to be allowed to vote and make your voice heard. Take God into your voting booth with you. Okay? How do you do that? Easy. When you get your ballot, pray over it. When you get the ballot listing of all the officers, pray about it. Lord, who would be the best man, woman, or whatever that you want to see here? Who will listen to you the best? When you go into the ballot room, ballot box, where you fill out the ballot, I don't know if it's going to be in a building or at home. I have no idea about that. Don't even care. I know what I want it to be. And I'll tell you right now, what I want it to be is to go into the ballot box. I want it to be that because I feel better doing it that way. That's all it is. No pressure, no preference other than my personal. When I go into that box, I take an extra moment and I say, God, give me wisdom on who to pick that will pay attention to your way. Now, they won't always do it my way. I know that. You know that. Because we have a big country and there's a lot of people who don't believe the way we do. But when you put God first, even in your ballot box, God honors his people. Will you win? You may not. But God knows the hearts and minds of every politician that's running. And sometimes he lets it be a person who will follow faith. Other times he wakes up his people by it not being a person who follows faith. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the king is back in power. The king is coming up. The king is responsible. The king has gone bipolar. He's gone pro-God, anti-God, kill God's people, promote God's people. And Daniel, and I'll use, just to make everybody happy, Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are having a happy moment in life. But this is a series of unfortunate events. Dear Lord, as we leave your house this morning, we ask that you would guide us, direct us. Lord, help our faith to be unwavering even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of hardship, even in the midst of unknown, unforeseen, and unfixable situations. Lord, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, as they stood before the king, knowing that that furnace was burning 7 times hotter than normal, they said, we will trust our God whether we live or die. Lord, give us that strength of conviction. Give us that strength to be a testimony to your life in us, through us, and around us.